Hello and welcome to the latest of my deep dive videos. Today I'm going to share the journey of Venus through the sign of Gemini, which begins on the 11th of April at 4:47 a.m. Universal Central Time and concludes on the 7th of May when it makes its way into the sign of Cancer. Thank you so much for joining me. If you're a returning visitor, it's great to have you with me once more. If you're new here, I'd be honoured if you would subscribe. Please click or tap on the bell notification symbol. This is very much a community, so if you have any thoughts you'd like to share, I do interact with each one. Now, Venus is the planet of relating, yes? True, but it's also the planet of money. So what I want to do first of all is explore the themes of Venus, because it rules two different zodiac signs. Firstly Taurus, secondly the sign of Libra. But how will it behave hosted in the air sign of Gemini? It's going to be a very vivacious, bubbly journey, I feel. There's also four very important angles that Venus is going to make in its journey. The first happens straight away in a connection with Pluto, which is very, very deep. But there's also a crunching and rather difficult angle to Saturn, which can really tease out some potential challenges in any relationship which is not working that well. But later on, during week one, Venus forges a bewitching but potentially confusing link with Neptune, but it also forges a potentially very exciting, fortunate one with Jupiter. So much to share with you. I'm also going to give you a flavour of each of the 12 zodiac signs that you can expect over this next 28-day period. If you would like to explore how serious astrology can impact on your situation and give you so much extra information to guide your life moves, if you give me 3 pieces of personal birth data of time, date and place of birth, my life roadmap reports can give you such a lot of extra insights in how to guide your moves and also help you to understand some of the patterns which have played out so far. The more challenging ones, but also the ones where you seem to have done better. A more intimate knowledge of these can really help you. Also, within my special package of 30% off, you can get your 12-month personal forecast. Totally unique to you. No two charts are the same, and that also can give you searing insights. If you don't know your time, I've established a unique solar chart and forecast based just on the sun. So it doesn't include a nominal ascendant, because when people do noon charts for people who don't know their time, it just ends up confusing folks. I've never promoted these myself personally, and I feel if you don't know your time and you enjoy relating to your videos on YouTube, these charts can give you lots of extra information. Again, 30% off if you buy 2, and the combination of the analysis and also the forecast, please see the link below for more. Should also say, if you want to get your free daily horoscope fired to your device each morning, I've been writing these for about 28 years now, please see the link below for those too. So Venus in Gemini year 2023 begins on the 11th of April, goes through to the 7th of May, 28 days. When did it last occur? Well, that was June the 23rd to July the 18th of last year. What are the Venus themes? Well, let's look at its rulership of Taurus first of all. So we have sensuality, but in a relationship sense, we can also get possessiveness, an appreciation of money for sure, but definitely self-worth and our core values. But if you've got a particularly sweet tooth or you love calorific goodies, maybe your Venus is in the sign of Taurus, or you have Venus in the second house. And also, of course, Taurus can be about earthly desires because it's an earth sign. Sometimes Venus Taurus people could have a real appreciation of material things, or quite conversely be someone who's very much into nature, growing their own vegetables, organics, cooking food from scratch. It can be a little bit of a polarization there. Nice clothes, food, wine, but ownership. So that's Venus qualities through Taurus. Its rulership of Libra is much more to do with relating, harmony, could be marriage, partnership, consensus, can be to do with a charm, which can be a bit superficial. It can also be to do with love, but in certain situations it can be a little bit superficial. But that's not saying that all people who have Venus in Libra, a Libran ascendant or a Libran sun or moon, will have a superficiality. It just can. But what about Venus in Gemini? Well, obviously we're talking about an air sign, so communication, and we're also talking about a mutable sign, which likes to flex, so it can be changeable. So flirty for sure, vivacious, quick-witted, a love of reading. My mum had Venus in Gemini and always had her head in a book. If you love writing, you may have Venus in Gemini or the third house. It can be someone who has a real appreciation of neighbourhood interaction or really enjoys linking with siblings. Can be a personality that's very curious, always trying to get more information and be quite chatty, unsurprisingly. A bit of a social butterfly. And again, potentially a little bit insincere, because it's hard for Venus in Gemini to be rooted with one possibility when it comes to social interaction or potentially romance, because the need for that mental stimulation, but also to be adored, especially through conversation, is definitely very strong. Now, in the event chart, which I'm sharing on the screen now, this is based on the solar horoscope. So this is how we can relate to this event as a collective. And that starts at 0 degrees Aries, like the Western tropical zodiac. And the big takeout straight away is that Venus in house 3 is forging an exact link with Pluto. Pluto's in the part of the chart in the sign of Aquarius in the 11th house, which is the collective, but also it's to do with community. And I think that if you have a relationship with someone where the communication is very strong, but also your value systems are quite well aligned, or you just find it very comfortable to be with one another, you could perhaps talk about quite frivolous things one second and the next dive deep, but really feel that that's possible. If you have that sort of multi-faceted way of relating to someone, you can really appreciate them over the next 28 days, and one relationship could get a whole lot deeper. However, if you're in a relationship at the present time, whether it's in a friendship group, whether it's with one particular social connection, whether it is in a romantic context, and you are not so sure of what's going on, Saturn's brutal right angle to Venus, which becomes exact on April the 13th, could bring that relationship to a very swift end. And part of the reason for this is that Venus is linked with Pluto, helps us to reach into our inner understanding of what we really want from a relationship and get much deeper down into it. And therefore, if there isn't something that's working so well, the coolness, the detachment, the harshness, the coldness even of Saturn can really be impacted upon that tie. So if you find it hard to chat with someone, if you find it hard because the air of Pluto and Venus in 2 air signs, Aquarius and Gemini respectively, if that isn't happening, or there's subconscious worries or unspoken obstacles or past hurts, they're all going to be aroused by Saturn in the 12th solar house. And however much we try to flex and find ways to communicate with that person, if they're absolutely decided that they're done, very difficult to push back on that. Now, in terms of the angle, the trine to Pluto, it's actually been building up since before Venus went into Gemini from April the 9th. It finishes on April the 14th, but it does peak on the 11th, the day that Venus enters Gemini. But also the square between Venus and Saturn, that starts on the 11th as well, but that goes on to the 17th. So if there is any kind of relationship, whether it's with a business colleague, family member, a neighbour, where it's not, you're not kind of getting the sound, the tonal mood music that you really want, then it can be very swiftly extinguished. But as I mentioned before, in week 1 of May, Venus squares Neptune. This is a very idealistic link, but you get a similar echo of the Saturn square with Venus, because we're going across the 3rd and 12th houses. So any kind of gossip that's doing the rounds, and Venus in Gemini can be very, very much into sort of salacious, juicy tidbits in the community. Oh, did she really do that? Oh my word! That kind of hot piece of knowledge that could well get some extra air in the next 4 weeks. But where Saturn is very cold, Neptune can confuse. So if you do go on a date in the next few weeks, you meet someone you really like, and you're going into week 1 with Venus and Jupiter also in week 1, forging one of the most brilliant aspects in astrology, because these in traditional astrology are the two benefics, lesser Venus, greater Jupiter. Then that could be a high point for some people. For other people, it could be a point where you just feel totally and utterly confused by what the other person's motives might be. So you could encounter someone who doesn't reveal everything about themselves. We've all heard and become much more accustomed to that modern phrase of ghosting. Well, I can't think of an aspect that would point more towards the potential of ghosting than Venus square Neptune across the 3rd and the 12th houses. It's just, especially because Venus in the 3rd house could be very much to do with social media, or a text message or an email, where people can, unfortunately, sadly, ruthlessly, just flick people out of their lives that no longer seem to serve a purpose. So that's what this transit has real fascination around, really. There's the potential for the highest connections virtually possible, and also for some crushing disappointments, all coexisting at the same time. So I think collectively for us, there is an opportunity with Venus in Gemini to be a bit jollier, talk to people, get to know new people, have a really good laugh. We may encounter someone that we find really fascinating. But if you're looking for something deep, be guided by those very powerful, potent energies of Pluto, which is really looking for what the motive is. If the motive's sound, it's not driven just by sex and money, because very often those things are part of the human state. And of course, Venus, in the case of its rulership of Taurus, very much about both, to be honest, sensuality and money. Or it's not about those superficial relationships which seem very oh darling, you look wonderful, what was your name, that kind of stuff as well. So we can all have some fun, and things can pick up. There can be more interactions. If you are using internet dating, you're in for a busy period, I'd say. But what we're looking for, I feel, when we emerge into the last week of this transit, in the first week of May, is really knowing where we stand around our relationships. So the dialogue's vitally important, the communication's important, but it's the meaning behind the message that is so incredibly key for the next 28 days. Please stay with me whilst I make my way through each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces to give you a little taste of what you can expect, and you can relate to this in terms of your sun or your ascendant. Aries, for you, I feel there's going to be a speeding up of activities, but your life, I feel, is rather paradoxical at the moment. I feel there is real opportunities to thrust forwards in new, fresh and exciting ways, but I also feel that there are some situations or friendships, maybe even a relationship, which will come to an end with Saturn in Pisces. Whether it happens this year or it takes a little longer is entirely down to you, because we have complete ownership. The planets just give us a lot of information. They do affect us, but I feel that we have the final decision. It's almost like being sat around a board table and the planets are all the executives reaching into what the chief exec wants to hear. The planets provide different perspectives, but it's the chief exec that makes the final decision, and you're the chief exec. So I feel that if something is disappointing you, I think there is the opportunity to get some speeding up, some lovely connections with people, and there could be a real slice of fortune in the first week of May. But just watch out for those people who may seem to be very, very alluring, very attractive, quite mystical, say all the right things, but there's not really a lot that's tangible there, and that is where you need to be cautious. Taurus. Well, for you, I'm going to tell you that your financial situation can be blessed over the next 4 weeks, which may seem a little bit surprising when we've got all these rocketing costs that seem to have affected pretty well everyone across the globe. But I feel that if anyone can enjoy a little bit of fortune over the next 4 weeks, it is you. Also, if you've worked very hard in your professional situation, the power of Pluto, and perhaps you've worked behind the scenes, or you've been learning lots of different skills over the last 15 years when Pluto went through your 9th house, all that knowledge that you've accumulated, all that experience can now crystallize around your financial situation in a very positive way. What's not to like? Well, it could be that somebody around you has starkly different value systems to you, and you may not have really been completely conscious of it, but if you weren't, you will be over the next week or so. So if someone, particularly a friend, tends to sort of rely upon you a little bit for your financial assistance or encouragement or nurture, your house is always a welcome pad for them to visit. But if you feel you're being eaten out of food and wine, then you may want to think this relationship if you don't feel there's an awful lot of respect or appreciation. Respect or appreciation, that's what I think you're wanting as well. Gemini, for you, Venus moving into your own sign is a wonderful opportunity to give yourself a glam makeover. What do you mean a glam makeover, Patrick? I'm already incredibly glamorous, and I can absolutely indubitably not become any more glamorous than I already am. Well, you're absolutely right, says he with a Venusian ascendant. What I would say to you is that even if you have been very comfortable with your personal look in the past, why not think about giving it a bit of a change up? You know, that Aquarius energy could see some influences come in, even ones that you just soak up by osmosis, the way society's going about different trends. You often have an unbelievably attuned antenna for where the news agenda's going, where fashion's going, where music's going, where cultural taste around colours and fabrics is going. You know, you're just very often on the ball. And I feel that those skills can serve you well over the next 28 days. But if you do want to bring someone into your world in a meaningful way, why not? It just may be in a professional situation that however much you try to impress somebody, they may seem steely-eyed, cold-eyed, unimpressed. So if you are someone who can work well with people and you can be very much a people person, which is often the case, just be aware that you could meet an opponent who's utterly unimpressed over the next week. Now, Cancer, for you, Venus moves into your 12th house, which could be a tricky transit. The 12th house, which of course you had Mars going through from August the 20th to March the 25th, is very much about the area that's our subconscious. If a relationship situation was turbulent through that period or downright confusing, do you know Venus moving into this area could be your decision to call it a day, particularly with Saturn emphasizing the part of your situation to do with your higher truths, or if you know more now. Because what I find in relationships, there are the like planetary patterns. As those patterns get repeated, we see them quicker. A bit like the longer you're an astrologer, the more you see how planetary energies play out in people. So we see it quicker. And I feel that if there is a pattern that you were shocked by or stunned by or upset by during those turbulent months of Mars going through your 12th house, now I feel that you could be ready to really make a decision. So the next 28 days are going to be critical. When Venus moves into your sign, you will have made your decision. Now, Leo, for you, Venus moving into Gemini is super sociable. You're often a person that attracts a lot of goodness. You have a radiance, an aura. You don't always even have to speak. People just feel that nobility, your regal vibe. Well, that's going to be turned up to max. But there could be someone in your friendship group who really has got the hots for you. You may really have the hots for them. This could even be in a professional situation where you come together in some kind of alliance which works brilliantly for both sides. What's more tricky is that if you're thinking long term about a relationship and there are financial limitations upon the couple, upon you at the moment, that could be a time of, this could be a time of serious thinking because of the role of Saturn. You know, if you feel that the other side is never really going to share your vision for the future or not really commit themselves. The 8th house is where we're most invested. It's the sector of devotion. If that devotion towards intimacy is missing, however much you like someone, you may feel that you'd rather just be free and enjoy a more vibrant period. And of course, with Venus moving into your sign for 4 months and Mars set to enter too, you're going to move into a period where lots of excitement's coming your way over the summer months. So this is going to be an interesting time for you. Virgo, Venus, like Gemini, like your sign, is mutable. And of course, like your sign, is ruled by Mercury. So Venus moving here is an opportunity for you to use your communicational skills, not just through the charm of Venus and the appreciation of the deal, the money, but also because you can raise your profile. The 10th house where Venus is going to help you to connect with some important people over the next few weeks. And it could happen almost straight away. If you're applying for a job, the link between Venus and Pluto can be fantastically positive. What about that square with Saturn? Well, if you're in a relationship where you feel that your partner always seems to have the power, you may push back on that. But you may do it in a diplomatic way, but you may do it. I feel that you are going to be wanting, in a gracious way, to assert your authority. Libra, for you, Venus moving into Gemini, your fellow air sign, is all about the higher truth. It's also about travel. Can be about enjoying different cultural experiences, the theatre and art gallery, going to a movie, watching a band, actually jetting off somewhere, really immersing yourself in some historical culture would be something you could enormously appreciate over the next 28 days. But because it links so brilliantly with Pluto in Aquarius, if your sun, moon, or ascendant are right at the start of Libra, you're in for a potentially really uplifting time. What about the square with Saturn? Well, Saturn's in the part of your situation that's to do with sacrifice, but you've done a lot of sacrificing on the back of Neptune being there since 2012. You may be a bit sacrificed out. If that's the truth, if that rings true for you, and especially around the domestic regime, if you live with someone, you may want to just get away from it all, to be honest, have a bit more freedom for yourself. But the first week of May, if you are single, could be really exciting. Now, Scorpio, for you, Venus in the sign of Gemini is the 8th house. Very much in keeping with your vibe, which is intense, can be a bit possessive, very devoted if you're really engaged by someone, but this could also be quite a busy time in a good relationship in terms of intimacy. You know, if you are loved up with one another and that part of your relationship is very important to the tie, expect to spend a lot of time in a warm embrace. What about if that's not your focus? Well, I feel it's your longer term finances. You could have a stroke of fortune, but it may be linked to someone else's fortune. For example, you could gain from a legacy, some kind of insurance premium or payout, or if you're in a partnership in a business, that too can be an area where you benefit. So exciting stuff. Sagittarius, for you, Venus moves into your 7th house, one of its best locations, because this helps us not to sweat the differences, to find those points between us that we have in common. And we all have things in common, but we do spend in the modern age so much time flagging up the differences and being very outspoken on social media, particularly Twitter, I would say. So I feel that for you, who can be, very blunt and very honest and frank, which is, a great part of who you are, Venus could mollify that a little bit, just soften the edges and help you to try to find the consensus, the midpoint, the give and take. But it could also bring someone into your world in a really lovely way. And with Pluto in your 3rd house of conversation, everyday conversation, it could be your ideas or your belief systems which are governed by the 3rd house where Pluto are. Someone could be very impressed by what you stand for, but also the way you come across. What about Saturn? Well, Saturn for you is in the 4th house, which is about home, family, emotions. If there is someone in your family situation or even a lover who you feel is very good at telling you what you want to hear but not understanding what you really need, this can be a seminal moment. But once Venus and Jupiter, your ruler, come together in such a wonderful way in the first week of May, that can be very good for you, particularly if you're looking to start a family. Now that brings us to Capricorn. Venus for you, Gemini is house 6. If you can use your diplomacy around a work relationship, it will work well for you. So even if you find someone grates a little bit, doesn't quite do things like you would like them to do, just give them a little bit of slack. Perhaps try some encouragement. It might actually work a lot better than being critical. But then hold on, your ruler Saturn is applying to Venus in a brutal way. So if something isn't working around your work, however much someone tries to dress it up under a facade of pleasantness, you may cut right through and tell them exactly what you think. Or conversely, someone could do that to you. Aquarius, Venus moving into Gemini is absolutely fantastic, particularly if you're born right at the start of Aquarius, because Venus in Gemini is the 5th house of romance. This is where we can really express ourselves. We can let the warmth of our natures come forth. We can be a little bit more daring. But Pluto gives you so much conviction in its angle to Venus. If there's someone that means a lot to you, you're really going to feel it in the first week of this transit. But of course, your traditional ruler, Saturn, is in a crashing right angle to Venus. What does that say? Well, the 5th house can be about risk, flutters, being more speculative. And Venus, of course, can be frivolous. So I wouldn't waste your money on anything that's not an essential purchase. And I wouldn't, put any money into something that you can't really afford. So, and also around relationships, if you've met someone new, don't be buying them flowers and chocolates too early. Let them prove themselves to you, because you could end up feeling quite hurt and disappointed. But the first week of May is looking absolutely amazing for some kind of connection, whether it's professional or personal. Pisces, Venus moving into this sector is very much to do with you beautifying your environment. You know, whether it's the outdoor space, if it's warm where you are, or the indoor space, if it's getting a bit cooler down in the southern hemisphere. The decorative touches, new furnishings, upholstering stuff that may be a little older but is very valuable and lovely. Perhaps, you know, you're going to be getting those colour charts out, those different fabric swatches, and seeing what you can do. But it also could be a time when you're wanting to get together with the people who really mean the most to you, whether that's close family, extended family, and also you could really feel a pull to someone from your past. And I think this will be particularly so if you're born right at the start of Pisces. You may feel very nostalgic, turning over the photo albums, looking at images on your mobile. And there could be a greater understanding of what that connection was about, even if it's not meant to be, even if you're no longer speaking to that person. You can just get a much greater understanding of how important it was, and perhaps still is, because our emotions are very active. Just because we're not physically sat with someone doesn't mean to say we're not connected to them. But what about the square between Saturn and Venus? I feel that when it comes to a home-based issue, so say for example you're wanting to take on a lease, a rental, buy a property, however charming someone is and however much they seem to tell you all the right things, just really dive deep to get at the nub of the small print, because Saturn is to do with structures, but it's also to do with being very businesslike. Venus can be, you know, very much to do with the relating side of it, which is all very nice. Cut down deep and get to what's really important. That's the key. When Venus forges that right angle with your ruler Neptune in the early part of May, you may feel particularly, your senses can be particularly heightened about the type of environment you may want to live in. But if not, it would be certainly a great time to get into nature, to be by the sea, be up by a river, a lake, go swimming, have some healing treatments, and that can be very, very recuperative and restorative for you in the first week of May. So that concludes my Venus through Gemini. I don't know if you've noticed, I've got a bit more spark about me today. We've just been so tired because we've had people working away in the house for the last 6 months, and it's very, very difficult to work. You know, you have to do everything later. Then there's the lives I do, the one-to-ones I do with clients, and all these videos. And so it's great to feel that I'm a bit more back to myself today, a bit more back on form. And of course, this Venus moving on the 11th into the sign of Gemini will be conjunct my draconic Mercury and trining my Sun, where Pluto is either going to make or break me over the next couple of years. It's been a pleasure having your company. I'd be so grateful if you did subscribe. Thank you so much for joining me, and goodbye.